You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Did you know there's new leadership at the Mississippi State University Deer Lab? We're going to make an introduction for you today with Jacob Dikes and Eric Mitchell here on the show.
Mississippi Outdoors is sponsored by Entergy Mississippi. Entergy is building a stronger and cleaner grid to power a brighter future and protect our great outdoors for generations to come.
We have Eric Mitchell and Jacob Dikes with us today from the Mississippi State University Deer Lab, which is something that a lot of our listeners are familiar with. But I will say, guys, I don't know that they're necessarily familiar with you yet, right?
Probably not. So, that's one reason we are thrilled to be here. We appreciate you bringing us on.
Yeah. And for those watching, Jacob here, Eric here. So I'll do a quick introduction. Eric, you're originally from Wisconsin. We're talking about that. What led you to the Deer Lab in Starkville?
I originally got to the Deer Lab in 2010. I finished up my undergraduate at UW Stevens Point and had an opportunity to come down here and work with Steve Damaris and Bronson Strickland for my master's and stayed on for my PhD. So I was here for about 6.5 years.
All right. A lot of Mississippians would wonder, what was that first summer in Mississippi like for you being from Wisconsin?
Well, I moved down in January, so it's a nice transition, but I do distinctly remember one day walking out Thompson Hall and just seeing the haze in the air and realizing that this was not the same summer that I was used to back in Wisconsin. So it was hot.
But I guess the trade-off, maybe not as much snow in the winter.
We had 24 inches of snow like 2 weeks prior to me moving down. And then there was snow in the forecast and campus shut down. And I knew that was a little bit different.
Wow.
I was going to be used to.
Hey, if a snow flurry in Tupelo, we shut down. We don't go to work, don't go to school.
No bread, no milk.
Yeah, and he's laughing at us, right?
Yep. That took a little bit of time to get used to. Is the threat of snow shut everything down.
Yeah. And Jacob, now, and you're from close to home and are close to home right now from Amory.
Not quite so far north as Eric here, but Amory, it's about an hour north of Starkville. So born and raised there, started under Dr. Damaris in 2011 as an undergraduate, and then moved into a master's position working with Bronson and Steve there. So, not far from home with me at all. So.
At all. Okay, and we've mentioned Steve and Bronson a couple of times, but for those listening and watching, there's a little bit of a transition going on from them to you guys. How would you kind of describe that for us?
Yeah, so we're products of the Deer Lab, and they've done such an amazing job of building this well-oiled machine that is the MSU Deer Lab now, and so they are, Dr. Damaris just retired, I guess June of last year, and then Bronson Strickland is, he's part-time at this point, and we'll be transitioning out as well. So we are the new Dr. Steve Damaris and Dr. Bronson Strickland. So we're taking the reins on the Deer Lab.
That's great. Well, congratulations, and I would think. Eric, you probably have people in and around there that they will probably refer to you that way. Hey, you're the new Steve, right?
Yep. I've heard that more times than I thought I was going to hear that, which is totally fine. It's in a certain way, it's an honor. Sure. What got me was last week we were out the deer pen starting a deer, and one of the technicians looked at me and said, "Doc," which is what we always called Steve during grad school. All of the students call him Doc. And we joked that Steve somewhere in Texas was looking up at the sky and knowing the transition fully occurred at that point.
I even felt something in that moment. When that student looked at him and said, "Doc," I was like, wow.
Yeah. So, well, I guess it's okay for us to talk about that though, too, on the personal side for you guys. It is a pretty cool thing. I mean, there's a lot of people that would love to be in the position you're in, and you've witnessed it firsthand with Steve and Bronson over the years, and now it's you in those shoes. It has to, every now and then you have to get a goosebump here or there to think, okay, this is a really neat thing.
Oh, every day. Yeah. I mean, I'm still having kind of weird feelings of sitting on Bronson's side of the desk, right? I'm in his office now, and it's just a weird feeling. And these are our mentors. Right. These are the people that we look up to and have learned so much from. And it's every day. It's kind of a wild feeling that it's come full circle.
Yeah. It was the same way when I started in January and I walked into that office. The number of times I've been in that office on the other side of the desk, it took me probably 2 months before I started to feel like it was my office. And even still now I just sit there sometimes and look around and be like, wow, this is strange.
Yeah, if they were to walk in and ask me to move so they could sit down, I would. So I'd get out of the way, right? But no, I mean they're dear friends of mine, mentors. That's kind of really neat in our field of basically climbing the ladder of being a trustworthy graduate student you hope to be, and then eventually a colleague. And now we've come full circle. It's pretty wild. I'm very blessed to be in that position. So
yeah. What, this may be sort of cutting to the chase a little bit too, but from your perspective, the future of the Deer Lab, like it couldn't be a more broad question, but like what's out there? What do you kind of foresee, and what path is it going to take, and what direction are you going to take the Deer Lab?
Well, I think, we've talked about this a lot over the past few months, and our main goal is to come in and keep this thing running the way it's been run. We want to hold tight to the values of working with the state agency. We're going to want to keep close to that applied work, make sure that the agency has a product that they can use. And that's really what we want to come in and establish right away. We want to make sure that we're producing students that can go into the workforce, that, can go into a state agency and produce. And that's kind of our first goal coming in.
100%. Keep that Deer Lab identity. Keep that boots on the ground management. Make sure we're, answering the tough questions, but answering those questions that are going to help landowners, going to help biologists, be better at their job, and produce students that are going to be able to hit the workforce running. So yeah, we're going to keep moving forward with exactly what we've done, what they've been doing, and take it to the next level.
Okay. All right. So if we were to have someone listening who is not familiar, they've heard us now say MSU Deer Lab, they know we're talking Mississippi State University, but almost at a very elementary level to help someone that doesn't know what it is and what it does. Describe that for me and for them, the purpose and kind of what the Deer Lab does.
Yeah, so we're involved with deer-focused research. White-tailed deer are one of the, if not the most sought-after game species in the world. They're an economic giant when you start thinking about the money that is poured into these economies from pursuing them, hunting and traveling and that kind of thing. And of course, they just mean a whole lot to us, right? White-tailed deer are cool critters. And, what we do at the Deer Lab is we're steadily working out ways to improve the way that we manage wildlife and wildlife habitat. And our focus is white-tailed deer. So that's what we do is, we work with landowners. That's another thing about being applied is, we talk with landowners. We talk with Mississippi Department of Wildlife Fisheries biologists. What are the problems you're facing? What can we do to help? What questions do we need to answer? Yeah. And then we go out there, we do that research, and we make sure that whatever we find, we get that to the hands of the public. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Well, and it's a very social thing too. I thought about that as you were talking. I remember talking with Bronson and Steve on past shows here. It was really impressed upon me. Sometimes we might think of research, that those of us that don't do much, we think of research as behind closed doors, in a lab, data. But in your position, it's much more than that because you're constantly, it sounds like, in communication with not only students who you're educating, but actual hunters, landowners, and the agency. It's a communication job as much as anything, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You think about it from the start of the process of writing a proposal, putting together a budget for what that project's going to look like, recruiting a student, communicating with them what they're going to be doing, the expectations from the graduate side of things, executing, writing those manuscripts, getting out to the scientific community, and then also working with Jacob with Extension to get it out to everybody else so that they can use it. That's really the where the rubber meets the road with a lot of our work is making sure that we're hitting a lot of different buckets of people that we can get that information out to and that they can use it.
Yeah. Jacob, you were talking about the economic side of deer hunting too. And I couldn't help but think, you're from Amory, you know it. I remember going to college. I'm a football player and thinking, we were the big deal. Our games, football games in the fall, the big deal. Then I'd hear my own teammates say, well, when deer season opens, it's going to cut into the crowd. Yeah. And I think, really? And they're like, oh, yeah. And I learned really quickly. And it's that way all over the Southeast and in other parts of the country as well.
100%. I mean, it's a way of life. It's a critter that we all appreciate. I don't care who you are in some capacity, whether you hunt or not. And that's an important part of what we do is, what we do is not effective unless we have the public on board, unless that land manager is implementing whatever we find, right? You know, the majority of the country is privately owned. Like, we need those people out there running and doing and managing for us. So that's what's important. So kind of what he said, you know, we're bridging that gap between research and management, boots on the ground management. So
when did you two get to know each other? Like paths cross?
We overlapped right towards the end of my PhD, probably 2014, 15.
Okay.
Yeah, I got there in 2011 and then back in 2015. So that would have been it. Yeah, 2015 or so.
So about 10 years. You're about 10 years into it.
Yeah.
So y'all have kind of been on this path together now for a good decade, huh?
Yeah. He's been up north and I've been in South Texas, you know, in very similar roles. And it's kind of wild how it's all come together and met back at Mississippi State. But,
Sure. So this may be a dumb question. We'll see. But in terms of research, here you are in Starkville, Mississippi. You know, you study them there at the lab on campus or near campus. You've got a background in Mississippi. You've spent time in Texas. You got a background in Wisconsin. Do those geographical references in different parts of the country factor in to how you do the research and the fact that you can plug that into that mental computer, that experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it just gives us a better understanding of various aspects of deer ecology, management. I mean, the way deer are managed in Wisconsin and South Texas is a little bit different than parts of Mississippi, right? So we can tackle things with a little bit different perspective that helps.
And then also, you know, just getting experiences in those different landscapes too. Yeah. You know, it helps you start to put that puzzle together on what factors are important and what are shaping the things that we see and the way that things work. And I'd say there's more similarities than differences, but getting out and away from here and bringing those skill sets that you learn from there back, I think, it's going to benefit us a lot.
So more similarities than differences, but there are differences.
Definitely differences. Definitely differences. Yeah. You know, for example, in South Texas, a lot of the management recommendations that I have here are reliable because rain is reliable. In South Texas, rain is not reliable. So in a lot of cases, not only do those management recommendations not always work, they can also be detrimental to what you're trying to accomplish. So it's very different. Very different.
And in Wisconsin, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, and so I most recently came down from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, where I was a research scientist for the agency studying deer and elk. And one of the things I did while I was there is run their population model and help establish the number of tags that we're going to allocate per unit. And over half of the state of Minnesota, you can only kill one deer. And probably about 30% of the state, you can only kill a buck. So very different management compared to here where you have liberal harvests and it just looks different.
Yeah. So a big difference just from a numbers and a ratio standpoint, I guess. And that's according to population, overall population, which affects those numbers.
And it's just different. In northeastern Minnesota, you have really severe winters that can wreak havoc on deer. You have different species. So there's a moose population up in northeastern Minnesota that we're constantly trying to manage for whitetails and moose, but they can be in competition from time to time. In the southern part of the state, it's a really heavy agricultural region. So there's just a lot of limiting cover. So, I mean, all those things come to impact the population. You just have to be careful with how we are managing that. Yeah.
And deer ecology can change pretty drastically with, you're talking winter severity versus down here, you know, you don't have those severe winters. You've got longer growing seasons, just all sorts of different things that kind of play a part in shaping what's going on. So,
what about this new deer facility?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So right now we are in the works of putting out for bid. Actually, we've got plans to build an entire new deer facility. And one really cool thing about it, you know, the deer facility that's existed is you know, it's been amazing work done there, and it's just time for it to be rebuilt. But we're also going to add an outreach hub to this deer facility. So it's going to be set up to not only do cutting edge research, but also make sure that we're connecting with those landowners and those biologists and people like that to show them what we're doing, you know, make sure that whatever we find is again, turned into a tool that they can go and use and help with management.
I would think that, you know, construction companies, that type, I mean, they bid out all kinds of jobs. It's not often they're bidding out to build a deer facility.
Exactly. Yeah. So that makes it a little more complex, right? And of course, the number one focus is to make sure we build a facility that's going to ensure those animals are taken care of and that all of that good stuff is in order. But yeah, it's exciting. One thing I mentioned to Eric was I kind of see this as like, when they put a under new management sign on a restaurant or something like that. Like we've just got so many things happening. And the reins are being handed over and the deer facility and the outreach hub, and it's going to be cool.
The deer facility is something that's really kind of close to my heart. I did my master's and my PhD out at the facility. It was a 10-year funded project from MD WFMP. We called it the Environment Genetics Project. And excuse me, that was the goal was to better understand how nutrition affected antler and body growth throughout different regions. So we brought animals from the lower coastal plain, the thin loss region, the delta region back and fed them all the same nutrition, kept them all separate, and found that antler size is limited by nutrition. And so that was a pretty big finding. And I was able to work with a lot of the biologists that are still here today and continue to work now in this different capacity. So the deer facility is going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot of plans for that.
Well, and fun and important.
Very important.
Exactly.
Yeah. From a research and an outreach. Yeah. Like an overall impact.
You touched on the outreach hub. Tell me a little bit more about that as it relates to the way it's been versus what it will allow you to do.
So, the way that it's been, the deer facility is more just kind of behind the scenes, the research and stuff that we've done. I also worked in the deer facility as well. So, that when we were doing research, it was more behind the scenes, that kind of thing. We're wanting to make it, I won't say accessible, but somewhere where we can take people and show them what we're doing, and that's tough often in wildlife research to show what we're doing, right? So we're actually going to have an outreach building at the deer facility that it's going to allow people to come out, see what we're doing. Again, the goal is to take research and turn it into management. So we've got to be able to connect with landowners. We've got to be able to connect with biologists and that kind of thing. And I think it's going to facilitate that.
Is, out of curiosity, is it the kind of thing like kids' field trips, that kind of?
Absolutely, 100%. And that's a great point, and something that's very important to me is, I learned about this field a little later than I would have wanted to.
Okay.
And one thing that I want to make sure that we do is kids know that this is an option, right? Mm-hmm. Wildlife biologist is an option.
Right.
So that's going to be, we've already had a couple of schools contact us like, hey, can we bring the classes out? Well, give us just a little bit of time, but absolutely, that's what it's going to be for.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that, because we've talked to so many people that are sitting in the chair that you're sitting in. And whether it be they're in the department or, one part or not another, whether it's fish or hunt or bear or whatever, wildlife management. And we've heard so many people, or have told me, I had this aha moment as maybe an 8th grader or I was a senior when I met someone, I thought, man, you mean I can do that you're kidding, for a living? I can do that. And so what you're saying is, why not have that aha moment in the 4th grade?
Exactly.
Or in the 2nd grade?
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. And I got really lucky meeting a Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks biologist when I was a general studies major at Itawamba Community College.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? This is what I'm interested in already. I didn't know it was a field. So, I transitioned to Mississippi State, and the rest is history. But yeah, we got to make sure people know before they're making major decisions that it's an option.
Itawamba, ICC, just up 25 from where you grew up.
I spent more years there than I was supposed to. Yeah. Had a good time, but it's that's one of the most important things I think that we're interested in is field trips and just getting people out. Because again, wildlife research, it's tough to show people what we do, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it's important stuff.
Well, back to the communication aspect we were talking about earlier as part of it. That's in the role you're in now. Eric, for you, your aha moment sort of in this field.
Yeah. I was a sophomore in high school, and I grew up in a dairy farm in southwestern Wisconsin. And when I was a sophomore, chronic wasting disease was found in southern Wisconsin. And I was always super interested in deer hunting. I mean, deer hunting in Wisconsin is big, to say the least. And but I was also really interested in the biological sciences. So when chronic wasting disease was found, we had I can't remember what, my biology class, we had to write some research paper, and I chose CWD. And that was when I started to realize, like, wow, there's people out here that do this type of work. They study deer for a living. And then that was the moment that I thought, okay, here we go. And that was that put me on the trajectory.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a good story. Yeah. I didn't know that.
How about that? We might need to pull out some more stories y'all don't know about each other while we're here.
That's a good one. I didn't know that. Yeah. But,
that's really cool.
But yeah, that deer facility is going to allow us to do that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Be impactful in that way. So,
not at all trying to steer us into a controversial topic, but it's just a reality topic as it relates to CWD. Where are you individually on that in terms of what it is, the reality of it? Let's just say for Mississippi, for our listeners in Mississippi, and kind of. The reality of that situation, and people, I'm sure ask you, how do you describe it and what do you say about it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a bad disease. It's a disease that we don't have an answer for. It's a disease that if left unchecked is going to cause population declines. We're seeing that in other states. It's very controversial, but call it what you will. It's killing deer. It's 100% fatal. It's something that we need to pay attention to. And we've got other states to see, to kind of show us what happens if you don't. So, we're going to be doing a lot of work in that realm. One thing that I have found is that outreach aspect is what's most important when it comes to talking about controversial issues.
Sure.
So.
One of the things that I'm hoping to continue that was started here was trying to determine better ways to sample for state agencies. And Steve was working on some of that stuff with one of his students prior, looking at sampling scrapes for early detection. And that's some of the work that we're trying to wrap up now. And I'm hoping to continue some of that work. But coming from a state agency, chronic wasting disease is devastating to a state agency. We put a lot of time and resources into sampling and monitoring and all sorts of that stuff. So if we could develop new methodologies that allow us to detect on the landscape without taking all the personnel and time that it would take, that could really help agencies out.
Yeah. As you're saying that, Eric, I couldn't help but think about what I've just by being here in the building and hosting the podcast and talking to some people, witnessing sort of the hands-on effort from everybody in this department when it comes time to sampling. It was really cool. It was like a whole team effort. Fisheries guys, everybody just jumping in. Where can I help to help sample? And I'm thinking, from your perspective, what a cool thing it is to have an agency like this who believes in you and you believe in them, relationship, and they can jump in and help.
Yeah,
with whatever you decide.
Yeah, they're doing a phenomenal job, and I think I mentioned this earlier about how important the public is, but the number one tool that we have to manage CWD is the public. It's the hunters, right? Mm-hmm. We rely on them to harvest deer and submit samples and that kind of thing, and the name of the game when it comes to disease management is keeping prevalence low, right? And so that's what we're doing. And there's a lot of really, really smart people, much smarter than me, that are doing great work, trying to figure out ways to increase the way our efficiency at sampling and things like that. But yeah, it's absolutely something we need to pay attention to and make sure that we're working to keep the prevalence low.
Last question on that. Do you ever run into someone who, wants to talk to you about it and maybe they're under the belief that it's a myth or that somebody's lying to them about the severity of it? Do you ever run into that?
Every day. Yeah. Especially with extension work, right? I do a lot of chronic wasted disease talks. We've got some research in the works, that kind of thing. So yeah, every day. And a lot of it is it's just misinformation. There are quite a few people out there that have a big platform and what they say goes. And unfortunately, it's not always good information. So,
well, and again, not to patronize you, but I'm just saying my perspective has always been, especially from a research standpoint, you're from a research standpoint, you're not trying to drive it one direction or another. I mean, the data is what the data is. Am I right? Isn't that Absolutely, the way it's handled?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we that's what makes our job easiest is it's not my opinion. This is all science-based information. Science evolves, of course. And that can sometimes lose credibility. Unfortunately,
Sure. Yeah.
People don't realize that science is steadily evolving as we collect samples, as we get more information. But yeah, it's not opinions. It's what we have, what science is telling us, right? What the data are telling us.
Yeah.
What makes it so hard is there's no cure-all. I mean, it's a really tough disease to understand. And we don't really have any leads on cures or anything like that. So it's tough because a lot of the research, we're trying to better understand what's going on to help inform something down the road. We just, at some points, we just don't know what that something is yet. So it can be tough to really discuss and understand. But
those same things make it a much more detrimental disease than a lot of diseases, right? You know, it's a diseased protein versus something that's living that can be killed with antibiotics or something. It's not a fungus or a virus or a bacteria or anything like that, right? So it's a problem 365 days a year. It doesn't take time off, you know, like most of those other diseases do. It's just a tough situation all around. And it takes a lot of empathy as well, because there are people being impacted, their livelihood and things like that. But it is tough. It is something we need to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah.
But I get questions daily on the conspiracy theories.
I figured you did.
Especially,
Yeah. Back to the expansion of the deer facility. What it's kind of going to go from to what it's going to hopefully go to from a size perspective and everything.
What does it look like? I've always wondered what the deer lab looks like.
So Chip wants to know what it looks like and what it's going to look like.
Well, currently it's about 12 acres. It's a facility broken up into 5 main pens. And when I was here, you know, the max number of deer we had was like 70, 75 does at one point in time. Now we only have 9 animals that are out at that facility, 9 or 10. It's going to look similar. Okay. The biggest change that we're talking about incorporating is some dirt work. We've got to do some grading. Well, that's one of the things that we battle all the time while we're here is just erosion. So that's going to really help improve that facility, but it's going to be updated. It's going to be in the same location that it is, roughly the same size, but the buildings are all going to be brand new. I mean, it's going to be a brand new handling facility, a brand new outreach center. It's just going to be a similar functionality, but much nicer facility.
And thinking about the way that it's built, aside from the few times where we'll like bottle raise fawns to have more control with those for certain types of research, we try to keep it as natural as possible, right? So we've got these pens where these large acres are a couple of acres where these animals are out amongst the trees and that kind of stuff, right? So you're trying to simulate more of a natural environment when you do this type of research so that it's, a tribute to the... The natural stuff, right?
Natural stuff. Well, he said erosion.
Yeah.
And I started to say, you mean to tell me that 2 feet of rain in a month causes erosion problems? I mean, because that's basically what you've just had here late spring, early summer in North Mississippi. It's just every 48 hours we get a deluge. Yeah. And it's washing the topsoil out of my yard. I know it's probably washing it out of the deer pen.
It's a problem because those fawns can fit through some pretty small holes. So it takes a lot of attention to detail in the springtime, trying to patch things up. And so if we can mitigate that for a while, that'll be a big step forward.
Yeah, sure. Very cool. What about, from a student perspective, so obviously you have students who are in the program. What are the numbers like of people that are involved? Because I'm sure they're hands-on helping with everything also, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as we bring more deer into the facility and as we rebuild this new facility, you know, we're going to figure out what that looks like. Okay. I think there's a half dozen or so technicians right now that are responsible for animal husbandry, taking care of the animals, making sure that we're looking for any issues and that kind of thing. But yeah, you know, once we start building this thing and getting it going and bring more deer in, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You were talking about some of the specific research about antler size and diet. Chip and I were fascinated, and I can't remember if it was Bronson or Steve who told us the story. Maybe it was Bronson about the coupling that was made for the deer, for the antlers, so that you could manipulate the size of the antlers to see if a doe preferred the larger antlers or not. And the whole construction process of that and the engineering of that, he and I both sat there kind of with our jaw on the floor listening, thinking about how cool the project that was. Well, that's the kind of thing y'all are doing.
That's a great example of the utility of a deer facility, is you can do those types of things. That was Dan Marina's project back in 15, 16, 17, I think it was. Yeah.
He was right after he came in and took over the pens as I graduated finished my PhD. Yeah. So.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
It's something that can't be replaced. There aren't many captive research facilities across the country anymore because there are a lot of different reasons, but it's unique to have one here in Mississippi. We're one of the few universities that actually still have one going, and they allow you to change so many different aspects and keep things consistent like diet and things like that.
Yeah.
We get to ask questions that you can't ask in the wild because you can't control a wild critter. And that's the luxury that we have with the deer pen. So it's something that we're really excited to have.
Yeah, very thankful to have.
Someone listening that, let's say maybe they have a question. They have a smart question. I've been asking my question. Maybe they have a smart question that they want to ask you. Can they just pick up the phone and call, like stop by? Like how available are you for a question from, just a hunter who's listening to this podcast?
Our numbers are on the website. I answer my phone anytime it rings. And I love that, and that's the extension side of this is working directly with landowners. I love this stuff. And another side of that is we will and do conduct like deer management 101 programs where we may meet in Monroe County at the, at one of the event centers and have a meal and talk deer management for 2 hours. Like we're going to do that stuff around the state. Working with landowners, that's the name of the game of getting this information out to them. So give me a call. Sure. Yeah.
I'm the same. I love talking to hunters. I love talking to landowners. And just having a chat with them. It's
we are those people.
Yeah.
So, we're the same people, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, we love it.
That's great. Guys, thanks so much for coming by and letting us kind of get a little glimpse into some of the changes that are going on. Congrats to y'all. And
thank you.
Thanks for what you do. And thanks for coming by. It's been a real treat.
Thanks for having us. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Yes. That's Jacob Dikes and Eric Mitchell from the Mississippi State Deer Lab. Hope you enjoyed that. I sure did. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you outdoors.